to get us kicked off for the session today.
Thank you so much, Garrison, and thank you all for being here. And if you would turn on your cameras if it's comfortable for you as we start, so I can just see who you are. And as you're doing that, I'd like you to all take out your device and look at your calendar, whether it's your phone or on a tablet or a computer. And I'd like you to look over the course of the next couple of weeks and find a meeting that's important to you. And when you all have located a meeting that's important to you in the next couple of weeks, just raise your hand for a moment and put down your device at that point. Okay, now with your devices down, you can please, thank you, close your eyes for just a couple of moments and settle into your body and bring to mind the people that you will be meeting in this important meeting. And I'd like you to think of one or two qualities in the key people with whom you will be meeting that you appreciate. And simply reflect on these qualities and even consider how you might express your gratitude and appreciation when you are actually with them. And now, let's focus on why it is that we're having this meeting and what are the key values and purpose that underlie the work or the activities that will be discussed at this meeting. What is the significance of this meeting in the deepest possible way? It may be because it's important for a project that you're doing. Why is that project important? And see if you can find within yourself a deeper significance, a purpose that goes beyond your own self, and that includes working for the benefit of others. And spend a few moments reflecting on this. Okay, let's now open our eyes and re-engage. And this is an example of what we would call a micro-intervention. You can think of it as a micro-dosing of well-being that can be sprinkled throughout a day why is well-being important? We today are facing a crisis that preceded the pandemic, has been exacerbated by the pandemic, and will continue after the pandemic. And it is a crisis of components that reflect a failure for us to flourish, to thrive as a species. There is increased distractibility. 47% of a person's average waking life, they report to be not paying attention to what they're doing. 47% of the time. 76% of Americans have reported in a recent large-scale survey to be either moderately or significantly lonely. This was before the pandemic. Loneliness is more than twice-fold a risk factor for mortality than obesity is. The rates of depression and suicide have been skyrocketing. So there is a real crisis of well-being on the planet. And one of the things that we've learned from science is that there are many factors which influence well-being, both external factors and internal factors. And we need to do everything that we can for both external and internal factors to promote our well-being. What we do know also is that we can, within some range, we can all influence our own well-being, and we can create the causes and conditions to promote the well-being of those we interact with and work with. And we can design our ecologies in a way that is more intentional about the promotion of well-being. So this is what we have gleaned in our scientific work. I'm a neuroscientist by training, and what we and many other scientists have discovered is that well-being is represented in specific brain circuits that show plasticity. They change in response to experience and in response to training. And so we've been led to this really simple, but we think radical conclusion, which is that well-being is a skill and it can be nurtured. And so we're excited about partnering with Second Muse to do what we can to bring well-being into the eco-spaces of different organizations to help promote well-being in different sectors. So I will stop there and turn it over to my dear friend and someone on this planet who I so deeply admire and respect, Todd.
Hey, right back at you, Richie. I literally could listen to you talk all day long for a really long time. Let's not pretend that our economies serve the majority of humanity. As a matter of fact, they hurt the majority of humanity. When we're thinking about, well, why? Why did we build economies in a way that is so harmful for so many, for humans, for the planet? We think that, gosh, it's a design flaw. When we think about the rules of economics and whatnot, they didn't, we have these assumptions, embedded into kind of how and why we engage in economic activity. And human well-being and human thriving is not at the heart of it. And so it's not a surprise that it ends up being overlooked and ends up having ripple effects when it's amplified and globalized. Our intentions are reflected, as sort of Richie so masterfully sort of walked us through. Our intentions have ripples effects on ourselves. And when this gets translated into big social systems like economies, if anything, it just gets amplified. And so We truly believe that therefore it's not a surprise that that there's a crisis of well-being, as sort of Richie was talking about. And so what our belief is that we believe that well-being must be at the heart and the center of economy, so it ends up being stitched into the fabric of economic activity. And so that is actually what gets amplified, and that in doing so, we're all going to be better for it, even in economic terms, because we can link, whereas the absence of well-being and things like loneliness are linked to very negative factors, its presence is similarly linked to increases of creativity and increases of innovation, increases of healthier relationships. They sort of keep us going. And so through the Headstream program, we've spent the last 3 years working with hundreds of social tech startups to advance well-being for young people through digital spaces. And recognizing the mental health crisis that we're in, that Richie was telling us about, we've been really keen to take this learning and take this impact from this program and continue to amplify it. And one of the ways that we're doing this right now is through our partnership with Healthy Minds Innovations, which has developed this incredible well-being framework that's truly best in class. But what's more than that, they've actually started to develop tools based on this framework that advance well-being. And Richie just walked us through this, one sort of small example of this. And so we knowing how much time young people are spending in digital spaces, not just young people, all of us really, we're asking the question, what if the products that young people in particular were using were built on this foundation of principles of well-being? What if it truly was stitched into the fabric of technology? This is something that could actually reach not just 10%, not just 20%, but everybody, that's on these digital spaces. And so thinking incredibly wide in terms of, what we're ultimately hoping to affect. And so what we are actively doing together is building tools and resources for innovators to integrate these tools into their platforms, piloting these tools with select group of Headstream's cohorts, iterating on these designs for larger audiences based on the pilot, with an intent to roll this out to hundreds of innovators, while we're also evaluating this impact over time. And so we hope to be engaging with investors, large tech companies, gaming companies, policymakers, to find additional levers that we can continue to be changing during this implementation. And so we're incredibly excited to be with you here today, to learn from your experience on how we might incorporate well-being into the spaces where, in particular, beautiful young humans are present. Back to you, Reggie. Or Garrison, is that you?
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you so much, Todd. Thanks so much, Richie. So building on these examples that Richie shared of what a micro practice might look like, and also Todd's points around the possibilities for incorporating well-being into digital spaces, we thought we could actually begin or use the rest of our session to kind of glean a bit from the collective genius of those of you here in this Zoom room. And so I'm going to pop in the chat a link that most everyone should have access to. And there are two kind of basic questions, and I'll just share my screen as well. So the first question is, what are some other examples of micro practices related to these sort of pillars of well-being? So we're mentioning two here, connection and purpose. But I think we can think of well-being in other ways as well. But what are some examples of micro practices that can be incorporated into the various spaces that young people participate in? And then off to the right, the kind of parallel question is, what are these spaces? Where can these micro practices or opportunities to learn and practice well-being be embedded in terms of where young people already are? So kind of the left side is what are practices, and the right side is like, where can these practices be implemented? And we have just a simple example here in the middle. So one particular practice might be writing down a couple of positive qualities of a new teammate. And you might do this if you're in a classroom and the teacher has put you on a new project, and you don't know the person, but maybe pause and kind of intentionally think positively about them. And so what I'm going to do, you all, is give us about 3 minutes to just brainstorm. I'll put on a bit of music, feel free to edit directly, to make copies, take it where you will. And after 3 minutes, we will share, discuss, and kind of reflect on what we've seen. All right, guys. So please feel free to finish up. Maybe I'll just share my screen so we can kind of all see what we're referring to. But would love to open it up in our last few minutes together for anyone to just call out things that look interesting, maybe are surprising, or how they might build on some of these. I'm seeing a lot of nice ones around gratitude, friends, that things that made one smile, but really opening it up to Todd, Rich, or anyone in the audience.
Yeah, if you have a thought, just unmute yourself and just speak to it, please.
I had a thought. I apologize for missing most of this session, but I didn't see teaching platforms. I'm a professor and I teach on Desire to Learn and Sakai and Canvas, but I already put stuff like this on my course sites. So that's another idea where you can put the resources.
And we had one in the chat from Kristen Coates about love the one about when putting on a mask. Me too.
Great one.
Yeah, I love that too. And it's, I have found that to be so helpful during this period.
And someone feel free to keep me honest. RPG, these are role-playing games. Just doing translation for everyone.
You know, one of the things I think strikes me looking across at this is just seeing how many, all of these things can, or at least most of them can be done in so many different contexts. That's what I find myself thinking is, it's not like, oh, I'm going to have a mindful moment right now, but it's like, I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm just going to choose to put myself in the right space when I'm doing it.
And I think this point that you just made, Todd, is so important because it really is possible to do this anywhere, anytime. And the, I think, misconception that this requires a certain location, a certain posture, all of that, you know, we throw out the window. It's really possible to just bring this into every nook and cranny of everyday life.
Yeah. That's what I like about it, is that you don't have to wait for the optimal, moment, which hardly ever comes, right? You can sneak these practices in throughout your day. And I think it's just healthier and more accessible for people.
Every moment is the optimal moment.
Yeah. I'm wondering, I'm so excited about the partnership and collaboration here. I was curious too, like, how this fits into, Richard, the framework that you've developed and how you see, working with startups, as you were mentioning at your Second Muse and Headstream.
Well, the framework, first, thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. The framework holds that there are 4 pillars of well-being that show plasticity and that can be nurtured. And through that, we can learn the skills of well-being. And the 4 pillars are awareness, which is where mindfulness would be, the capacity to know what our minds are doing. The second pillar is connection, which includes qualities that are important for our social relationships, qualities like appreciation and gratitude, kindness. The third pillar we call insight. And insight is a curiosity-driven quest for self-knowledge, knowing particularly the narrative that we all carry around about ourselves and how that narrative shapes our experience of the world. And when we can be deeply understanding of that fact, it liberates us from the constraints that the narrative imposes. So it's not so much getting rid of the narrative. That the narrative is something that human minds do, but it's deeply understanding how this narrative works to loosen the grip that it typically has on us. And finally, the last pillar is purpose. Purpose is about not so much going and finding something more purposeful to do in one's life, but rather how do we attach meaning and purpose to the things that we're doing and expand that circle. And so we think that it is possible to insert micro practices and other tips to bring these elements into digital ecosystems in a way that can help to nurture well-being. And one of the things that's amazing that the science shows is that these really small interventions, if they're timed properly, can really make a big difference.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I know we're just about at time. Any final questions or thoughts before folks move to the next session?
Is there anything we can help support? I noticed you were mentioning that you're partnering, collaborating as you're launching this partnership. Is there anything we can do to support the effort?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if this is something that is definitely within your realm of interest, I mean, given the fact that I know that we're at time, please reach out. Please reach out to us through anybody on the Headstream team, and would be able to connect us, and would be able to connect you to the team at Healthy Minds or Second Muse. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, we'd love that.
Maybe I'll actually, if I take 15 seconds, really early on when I was trying to figure out my path to mindfulness, I approached somebody who I knew was an active practitioner of mindfulness and had been for years. And he told me this story of searching through finding the perfect Zen Buddhist master. And I mean, it was this very heroic tale of how he finally found the perfect person. And he said, what can I do? And he said, well, you have to dedicate 2 hours a day to me. And he says, well, who has 2 hours a day? And he says, well, in that case, you have to dedicate 4 hours a day. And so he says, next time you say no, the number's going to keep going up. This feels the opposite of that. It's like stitch it into the fabric of our lives, because it makes a difference.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to pass it on to the next session, but really appreciate the time. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Garrison and Todd, and thank you all.
Thank you all.